Everybody, the Simple Handicap for Thursday, September 26th. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. Thank you to everybody who tuned in to the Wednesday live stream preview yesterday at 9 a.m. Pacific. It was good to see so many folks back in the live chat and hopefully got to as many questions as was necessary to get your questions answered. As always, if you have anything do you want to know or perhaps I can help out with, the comment section is always down below if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, Twitter DMs are always open as well if I can help with anything or answer any questions you might have about games or teams or anything betting related. Let's get to the market rundown for this Thursday and get you on your way this morning. Things kick off tonight for NFL Week 4 with the Dallas Cowboys going on the road to take on the New York Giants. Number still holding steady this morning. Cowboys minus 5.5 total in this game. Hasn't moved either. Still looking at 45 or 45.5 this morning, depending what sportsbook you're looking at. We did get final confirmation on the Giants injury report yesterday. As it looks and stands right now, Adoree Jackson will miss. Drew Phillips will miss. Couple names down in the secondary for the Giants, and as talked about yesterday on the preview, the interesting part becomes how are the Giants going to handle their blitzing? Last week against the Cleveland Browns, Shane Bowen brought a lot of blitz, was able to get home and disrupt a lot of what the Browns were trying to do on offense, but that was really accelerated by the Browns' offensive line issues. Dallas Cowboys don't have those same injury issues, and they also have a quarterback that's far more dynamic and far more successful at throwing against the blitz. He's one of the best in the league. So do we see the Giants defense return to that bend but don't break style they employed and said on the broadcast they wanted to play against the Washington Commanders that we saw in week 2? Or is it another curveball potentially from the defensive coordinator against the Cowboys offense that is much better equipped to handle it? As I said yesterday, I was hoping to get involved with Dallas earlier. I was hoping that was something we could get out on the service. Talked about it on the podcast as well in the openers. I know a lot of folks are tied to it. At 5.5 after the move, obviously much less of a stronger sentiment on that play, but I would still look and lean here to the Cowboys at 5.5, albeit definitely now at a much later number and a much bigger number than we have been talking about for the entire week. Let's get to Sunday. It's the New Orleans Saints on the road at the Atlanta Falcons. Talked about it yesterday here on the podcast. I was saying, look, there are these tweets coming out. There's news coming out. There's something going on with the Saints injury report, and we got the full extent of it yesterday, and it's something you definitely have to keep an eye on today. We're looking at Alvin Kamara missing practice. Word is that he is going to try to play on Sunday, but dealing with a lower body injury. Eric McCoy earlier in the week, their center, went on IR, a massive loss for the Saints offensive line. But now that it's coupled with Cesar Ruiz at right guard dealing with an injury too, the Saints have been working out several offensive linemen. The injury report came to deliver the blow that was expected. But then also that was compounded by Demario Davis, their middle linebacker, and Alontae Taylor, their nickel cornerback, both finding the injury report too. It is a rough injury situation for the Saints, and they're really in a tough spot based on team reporters, guys who are close to the Saints, about how they're going to handle this offensive line scenario. It was a tough spot coming into the season, and now it's been turned upside down on its head after that Eagles game. Really look towards the Falcons in this game at the current price that is listed at 2.5 this morning. Total continues to tick down, 42.5, shaded down lower, showing 42 on the board. Pittsburgh on the road at the Indianapolis Colts. It is the Steelers, a 1.5-point favorite across the board with a total of 40. The Indianapolis Colts teased up, I think, is a great teaser leg this week. Would it be happy to pair that with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? As I said on the preview podcast, as I'm trying to kind of straddle the line between what I like and what I want to play versus obviously working with a betting group, being tied to a service as well, and respecting the people who subscribe in terms of what we can and cannot give out and what is good and reached upon consensus, as well as sharing some thoughts that I like as we get into the meat of this NFL season. Personally, I like the Colts here. I like them plus 1.5, but that teaser with Tampa Bay I think looks really good. So you can take that either way. I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers coming on the road in this game, and surprised, quite frankly, that the Colts are still an underdog at home. Don't agree that these two teams should be rated equally. I think the Colts should be rated higher. I wouldn't be surprised to see more Colts money enter the market as well in this game, trend towards a pick'em. There was a chance for it to push towards 3. It never did. think that's a telltale sign of where this market is going to go. We're sitting at 1.5 across the board with a total in 40. Jacksonville on the road at the Houston Texans. This was 7 yesterday morning for the Houston Texans, and Jags money has come back into the market. The 7s are gone. We're back to 6.5. And here's what you need to know about the Texans. Mixon and Pierce, both limited or non-participants at practice, along with Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. 2 more injuries to skill position players. Jimmy Ward in the secondary dealing with an injury as well. So skill position guys for Houston dealing with some issues. Now, Jacksonville is not free and clear on their own. They're dealing with injuries to Gabe Davis, Evan Ingram, Cam Robinson, Olukin, their best linebacker. And looking back at Mike Clay ratings, he was a top 3 graded out linebacker at his position. You still obviously do not have Tyson Campbell, who's on IR. Jerry and Jones. Monteric Brown is dealing with injury. Like, there's so many injuries piling up for Jacksonville to watch throughout the week, especially on that defensive side. But this number was inflated up, nearly a field goal from the look-ahead price from the reopen to where it got to, and it's understandable why there would be Jacksonville money coming back, but I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment at the Jags here, as I'm just looking at the Texans in this spot. Depending on how this injury report settles up on offense, might have a difference of opinion on that later tomorrow, but was certainly kind of intrigued by the idea of Houston. Never acted on it, sitting here looking at it. I think at 6.5, it becomes something to consider, but that buy at 7, certainly telling on the Jags considering how many injuries they are dealing with. Minnesota, Green Bay, Packers 2.5-point favorites across the board. Jordan Love was labeled as having a real shot, was the official quotation, to play on Sunday. Getting to the point where it might be more surprising if he doesn't play than if he actually is out there. I do think if he is able to go, he's going to be effective. I think the Packers are going to be able to move the football. It's in the window of expected return time from the initial injury and some of the reports that came out after the Week 1 game. Don't know if anybody's going to get a concrete answer on this before we get it officially later in the week from Matt LaFleur, as it seems like reporters around the team had the same speculation and the same optimism last week when they were showing the practice videos. Let's wait and see. Get the feeling it's a bigger favorite for him to play than not based on what has been reported so far this week. Cincinnati on the road at the Carolina Panthers. This one's tough to believe. Panthers take money again yesterday. We're down to Bengals -4 this morning, and it's a cheap 4. -105 at Chris and Circa, -102 at Pinnacle. We're looking over at other offshore sportsbooks, 105, even money. I mean, the Panthers continue to get bet. And what was a bit of a surprise yesterday is we start to see some of the injuries that Carolina is dealing with. Damian Lewis at left guard hits the injury report. You have Shai Tuttle, the nose tackle. You say it with me. You guys know the quote. You never underestimate the loss of a good nose tackle. You also have Ashawn Robinson, edge rusher for the Carolina Panthers, dealing with injuries too. So, I mean, all of a sudden there's injuries piling up for the Panthers. Adam Thielen earlier this week went on IR. And the Panthers are getting bet like the final score is known in the market. I mean, it's continuously Carolina money. If this gets off the 4 and the Bengals don't take money at 3.5, I'll be very surprised by that. Jamar Chase was on the injury report. It was a limited participation. They played Monday night. It's a Wednesday report. I'm not reading too much into that designation. The 2 guys that I would continue to watch are Sheldon Rankins and B.J. Hill in the middle of that defensive line where the Bengals desperately need help. So that'll be something that's more notable later today, and I think we see Chase back participating in full. LA Rams on the road at the Chicago Bears. It is Bears now a 3-point favorite across the board. We're seeing Circa, high price in the market, 3 -115. Fully agree with that, as we've talked about a lot this week. Total in this game, 41. Denver on the road at the New York Jets. Jets a 7.5-point favorite. There was the release from a competing service earlier in the week on Denver +8. We saw a buyback from the Jets at -7. Welcome to the early season NFL. Disagreement with almost every considerable move, especially when it is around a key number. An interesting injury for the Broncos. Unfortunately, they will be without Alex Singleton for the rest of the season, and it came as a surprise yesterday. He finished the game, but in the interview, Sean Payton casually drops the bad news that he blew out his ACL in the game and finished the game. So that's kind of one of those crazy injury stories that nobody flagged and nobody had coming out of the game on Sunday, and yet here we are with a middle linebacker for the Broncos being lost for the remainder of the season. Went back and looked at ratings. He was coming into the season 12th at his position for all off-ball linebackers ranked. A loss to the middle of that Broncos defense for sure. Still a very good unit. I thought the commentary from Patrick Surtain was very interesting. Yesterday, we've seen whether it's Cam Taylor-Britt or other corners get very personal and very kind of out of line with commentary for opposing receivers. What he said about the Jets, what he said about Garrett Wilson, I thought was quite humble and quite honestly one of the more professional responses you see from a defensive back almost ever. He has been great, locking down number one wide receivers, and has a big matchup this week against Garrett Wilson from a Broncos defense that is, in my opinion, underrated coming into this game. Philadelphia on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The 2.5s are gone for Philadelphia. This is now down to a flat 2 across the board. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith do not practice yesterday. Were not present. Mekhi Becton, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson now added to the injury report. Those 2 injuries on the right side of the offensive line seem more meaningful. I don't want to discredit what Dickerson's injury is, but his came up late, where Becton and Johnson were dealing with known injuries from earlier in the week, typically more impactful and typically more indicative of the potential status and inavailability for them on the weekend. The Philadelphia Eagles have a bye next week. It seems at this point, the way that they are handling the injuries to Smith and Brown, that they're more likely to miss this game than not and then return post-bye. I get the impression that as this injury news comes out and as we get more confirmation, this number is going to continue to come in. Hence part of the reason why I like the Buccaneers as a teaser. But also, when looking at the teaser with Tampa Bay and with Indianapolis, the opposition here, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, both very limited offenses. Philly limited, obviously, without wide receiver number 1 and number 2 and a banged-up offensive line. Pittsburgh limited by design and how they play. And you're getting the Colts and Buccaneers with very competent offenses getting extra points above the touchdown to keep it within margin at home in games with short totals. This teaser checks all the boxes for me, but also looking at Tampa Bay as a side that I like personally this week. Washington on the road at the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals 3 -105 across the board in the market. Trey McBride was not present at practice. Marvin Harrison hits the early week injury report with a quad issue. Seems like the jeopardy of McBride missing is far more than the possibility of Harrison missing this game based on the early week injury report, as McBride has to overcome the concussion protocol. That'll be more information shared later today from Arizona on what his status is going to be, but it's certainly going to play a factor in this game. The Washington Commanders just continuing to get bet, continuing to catch a ton of hype out of the Monday Night Football win. Total hasn't quite creeped up yet, still sitting at 50, as I mentioned, across the board. New England on the road at the San Francisco 49ers. For San Francisco, it is George Kittle back at practice in limited fashion. All signs indicating that he is going to be good to go. Trent Williams was not at practice, but he played nearly every snap in the game last week. It is more a conditioning thing, as he was getting an IV near halftime to deal with cramps and issues that he was fighting from a back-to-game shape perspective after missing the entirety of training camp. So I would expect Williams to be back operating at practice this week. And the only major name that we haven't known now for a while to miss this game is going to be Deebo Samuel, still dealing with that multi-week injury. So expectation is that the current version of the 49ers is going to be all signs go, and we're starting to see this number creep up a little bit now. 10.5s in the market this morning with a total of 40.5. Cleveland on the road at the Las Vegas Raiders. This was the Browns team I circled yesterday and said, you got to keep an eye on what we're getting here. David Njoku still dealing with the injury, but we're looking at Jedrick Wills, Joe Bitonio, Jack Conklin, Wyatt Teller went on IR earlier in the week, DeJuan Jones, James Hudson, Javion Cohen. I just named 7 different offensive linemen for the Cleveland Browns who have no resemblance of a ground game, dealing with some ailment at a various level of concern for their status coming up on Sunday. And so continuing to look at what you're getting from the Browns offensive line is key against this Raiders defense that obviously has a very good pass rush and set of pass rushers on that defensive line. The Raiders take money out to -2, and I think that is a direct reflection of the injury status for the Browns up front. and just how anemic this offense has looked in past weeks where they have no ground game, and obviously won't if they have so many O-line guys banged up coming into this week. But Thursday practice, always very telling for offensive linemen, especially if they are non-participants. Kansas City on the road at the Los Angeles Chargers. The 8s in the market are gone as we're back to 7.5 for Kansas City. Justin Herbert sounds optimistic about his chances for playing in this game. I think it's complete malpractice, the way that the team is handling it. It seems very likely that they're going to be willing to push him out. But as you look at the depth chart and the injury reports that come through, very much looks like both the starting left and right tackle for the Chargers are not going to be on the field. I just worry a little bit here for the sake of NFL that Justin Herbert's being put in a bad spot, but it's hard to ignore this number coming in and the difficulty this offense has had all season generating a ton of explosive plays. If you take away the left and right tackle, we saw what it looks like against Pittsburgh and how much of an impact that had in the backfield. And it's going to be only worse if Joe Alt is unable to go on the opposite side of Slater. And so you get a very limited quarterback in terms of mobility in the pocket. He's going to have to be mobile against this Chiefs pass rush. This just seems like a bad situation for the Chargers, especially so as you look at the Chiefs' run game and how effective it was a week ago, despite not having Pacheco, and how easy of an out that is going to be for them to exploit against a Chargers defense that's quite overrated after the strength of schedule of opponents they have played so far through 3 weeks. And so this number is probably going to continue to come in as Herbert News gets more and more confident in terms of knowing his status. It definitely is not something that I agree with. Buffalo on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens 2-point favorites across the board. Total in this game 46.5. Getting to the Monday night doubleheader. Miami a 1-point favorite now across the board under speculation that Snoop Huntley may be the starting quarterback in place of Skylar Thompson, who's still dealing with the rib injuries. Seems to be some excitement about the prospects of backing that from bettors in the market, as this was once Tennessee -1, has flipped through pick and is now trending slightly higher as we see Bet Online -115. We're seeing Jazz -115. Some other market-making offshore sports books, all one leaning towards 1.5. Total in this game continues to come down now 36.5 across the board. And then the big game of the Monday night doubleheader, it is the Seattle Seahawks on the road at the Detroit Lions. Lions sitting as 3.5-point favorites. Injury situation for the Lions is well known at this point. You're looking at Sam Laporta and Frank Ragnow on offense. And then on defense, you're looking at McNeil, Anzalone, and Branch as 3 guys to watch. It seems like good news coming for Seattle, as Nwosu is trending towards playing for the first time in a couple of weeks, dating back to the preseason, as he was more present and active at practice than he has been in past weeks. But Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy, non-participants in what was estimated to be a Wednesday injury report. There was some walkthrough activity going on as well for the Seahawks. So nothing official comes out until later today, with this being a Monday game, but their status seems to be in jeopardy for Sunday, which would be a big impact on this defensive front for Seattle. A lot of disagreement from other shows, from other services. For our Detroit opinion, Seattle becoming a pretty popular and trendy pick looking across some shows. This is going to be a great game. A little bit surprised to see how the strength of opponents that they have played so far through 3 weeks is kind of getting disregarded, and how much this number has come in currently to 3.5 relative to some other closes for Detroit. I feel like the Detroit defensive injuries being elevated quite a bit too. So I'm going to be curious to see, after the Lions took very real professional money late in the week against a healthy Rams team in week 1, if there's a similar appetite against the Seahawks team that nobody really, from a consensus standpoint, is grading significantly higher than what they were for that Rams team in week 1. And that game ended up closing Lions -6 at home. I'm just wondering if this price where it's sitting is going to be too enticing for some bettors to play as the week goes on and we get into the later portion of the week. So let's see how this number trends. As it's a Monday game, we're going to get the first look at some injury stuff later on today. That'll do it for me today, everybody. Have a fantastic Thursday. We'll talk to you again here on the podcast tomorrow morning.